Machines are exceptionally good at recognizing patterns, and that ability is the foundation of how modern artificial systems operate. They process large amounts of data, identify statistical regularities, and use those patterns to make predictions or generate outputs. In many cases, this can look like creativity. Machines can produce text, images, music, or ideas that appear novel. But what's happening underneath is fundamentally based on recombining patterns they have already seen, guided by probabilities rather than internal experience. Human creativity operates on a different level. While it also relies on patterns because the brain stores and learns from past experiences, it doesn't just repeat or recombine them in predictable ways. Instead, it has the ability to break patterns, challenge them, and reorganize them based on context, emotion, and intention. This means creativity is not just about what is known, but about exploring what is unknown or uncertain. One of the key differences lies in internal states. Human creativity is deeply influenced by factors like curiosity, motivation, and emotion. These states shape what you pay attention to and what you choose to explore. For example, curiosity drives you to seek out new information or perspectives, even when there is no immediate reward. Emotion can highlight certain experiences as meaningful, pushing you to express or reinterpret them in creative ways. These internal signals act as a kind of guidance system, steering the creative process in directions that are personally relevant. Machines, in contrast, do not have these internal drivers. They don't experience curiosity or feel a need to explore. Their outputs are guided by input data and programmed objectives, not by a sense of meaning or desire. Even when they generate something that appears original, it is still rooted in patterns derived from previous data rather than an internal push to create something new. Another important aspect is the role of uncertainty. Human creativity often thrives in situations where the outcome is not clear. The brain can tolerate ambiguity and even use it as a source of inspiration. It can hold multiple possibilities at once, test them, and shift between them in flexible ways. This allows for sudden insights or breakthroughs that are not strictly predictable from prior patterns. There is also a strong connection between creativity and personal experience. What you create is shaped by your memories, your environment, and your interactions with others. These experiences are not just stored as data. They are integrated with emotion and meaning, which gives creative output its depth and uniqueness. Two people exposed to the same information can produce completely different ideas because their internal landscapes are different. Machines can mimic aspects of this by combining diverse data sources, but they don't have lived experience. They don't attach meaning to what they generate, and they don't evolve through personal insight. This is a critical distinction because much of what we recognize as true creativity comes from this integration of knowledge with subjective experience. The result is that machine-generated output can be impressive and useful, but it lacks the underlying process that defines human creativity, which is driven not just by patterns but by intention, emotion, and the ability to move beyond what is already known. Creativity in the human brain depends on the interaction between two very different modes of thinking: focused, structured attention, and spontaneous, free-flowing thought. These modes are supported by distinct neural networks, and the ability to shift between them is what allows new ideas to emerge in a meaningful way. When you are in a state of focused thinking, your brain is engaged in deliberate control. This involves attention, logic, and goal-directed behavior. You are analyzing information, solving problems step by step, and applying known rules or frameworks. This mode is essential for refining ideas, organizing them, and turning them into something practical or usable. Without it, creative thoughts would remain vague and unstructured. In contrast, spontaneous thought arises when the brain is less constrained. This often happens during moments of rest, mind-wandering, or low-demand activities. In this state, the brain begins to make connections between ideas that are not obviously related. It draws from memory, imagination, and past experiences, combining them in new ways. This is where many original ideas begin, not through direct effort, but through a more open and exploratory process. The key to creativity is not choosing one mode over the other, but allowing them to interact. If you stay only in focused thinking, your ideas tend to be logical but predictable. You work within existing patterns and may struggle to generate anything truly new. On the other hand, if you remain only in a spontaneous state, You may generate many ideas, but they can lack coherence or practical value. Creativity emerges when you move between these states, generating possibilities in a relaxed mode and then refining them through focused attention. This shifting process is not always conscious. Often, you might struggle with a problem while focusing intensely, reach a point where progress stalls, and then step away. During that break, your brain continues working in the background, making connections without direct control. When you return to the task, you may suddenly see a solution more clearly. This is not accidental. It reflects the collaboration between different neural systems. Emotion and motivation also influence how effectively these systems interact. When you are curious or engaged, your brain is more likely to explore possibilities and form novel connections. At the same time, a certain level of discipline is required to bring those ideas into a structured form. This balance between openness and control is what defines productive creativity. The environment you place yourself in can either support or disrupt this process. Constant stimulation and distraction can prevent both deep focus and meaningful mind wandering. On the other hand, creating space for uninterrupted work, as well as periods of rest, allows these systems to function more effectively. Over time, practicing this ability to shift between focused effort and open exploration strengthens your capacity for creativity, making it easier to generate ideas that are both original and useful. Love is not just an abstract feeling or a purely emotional experience. It is a biological process that involves coordinated activity across multiple systems in the brain and body. At its core, love is driven by specific neurochemicals that influence how you perceive others, how you form bonds, and how you prioritize certain relationships over everything else in your environment. One of the central components in this process is dopamine, a neurotransmitter associated with motivation, reward, and goal-directed behavior. When you experience attraction or deep connection, dopamine levels increase, which enhances focus and reinforces behaviors that bring you closer to that person. This is why love often feels energizing and why people in early stages of connection can become highly attentive and driven. The brain begins to associate that person with reward, making interactions feel meaningful and compelling. Another key player is oxytocin, often referred to as a bonding hormone. Oxytocin is released through physical touch, eye contact, and shared emotional experiences. It plays a critical role in forming trust and attachment, helping to stabilize relationships over time. While dopamine is more associated with the excitement and pursuit aspect of love, oxytocin supports the deeper sense of connection and security that develops with ongoing interaction. Serotonin also contributes to this system, particularly in regulating mood and emotional stability. Changes in serotonin levels can influence how consistently you feel connected and how your emotional state fluctuates within relationships. A balanced serotonin system supports a more stable and grounded experience of love, while imbalances can lead to heightened sensitivity or emotional variability. What makes love particularly powerful is how it shapes attention and perception. When these neurochemical systems are active, the brain begins to assign increased importance to a specific person. This process is known as salience, where certain stimuli stand out more than others. In the context of love, one individual becomes highly prioritized, often capturing attention in a way that feels automatic rather than deliberate. This shift in salience also affects memory. Experiences spasmody with that person are encoded more strongly, making them easier to recall and more emotionally vivid. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where attention, memory, and emotion reinforce each other, deepening the sense of connection. Love also influences behavior in very practical ways. It can increase motivation to invest time, energy, and resources into a relationship. It can shape decision-making, sometimes even overriding purely logical considerations. This is not irrational in a biological sense. It reflects the brain's prioritization of social bonding, which has been essential for survival and cooperation throughout human history. At the same time, love is not static. The balance of these neurochemicals can change over time, shifting the experience from intense attraction to more stable attachment. This transition is part of a natural progression where initial excitement gives way to deeper, more sustained connection. The experience of love emerges from this interaction between brain chemistry, attention, memory, and behavior, creating a state that is both biologically grounded and deeply personal. Both creativity and love rely on a fundamental process in the brain known as salience, which is the mechanism by which your nervous system decides what matters and what doesn't. At any given moment, your brain is receiving an overwhelming amount of information: sensory input, memories, thoughts, and external stimuli. It cannot process all of it equally, so it must filter and prioritize. Salience is the system that performs that filtering, highlighting certain elements as important while suppressing others. In the context of creativity, salience determines which ideas stand out among many possibilities. The brain constantly generates associations, drawing connections between past experiences, knowledge, and imagination. Most of these connections remain in the background, but some are flagged as significant. These are the ideas that capture your attention and feel worth exploring further. Without this filtering process, creativity would become chaotic, with no clear direction or focus. This process is influenced by both internal and external factors. Internally, your interests, goals, and emotional state shape what feels important. If you are curious about a particular topic, your brain is more likely to highlight related ideas. If something carries emotional weight, it becomes more salient and more likely to enter conscious awareness. Externally, your environment and experiences provide the raw material that your brain evaluates and filters. In love, salience operates in a similar way, but the focus shifts from ideas to people. Out of all the individuals you encounter, one person becomes especially significant. Their presence captures your attention more easily, their actions carry more meaning, and their absence is more noticeable. This is not just a psychological preference. It is a neurobiological process where certain signals are amplified while others are reduced. Neurochemicals like dopamine play a key role in this amplification. When dopamine levels rise in response to a person or experience, the brain marks that stimulus as rewarding and worth pursuing. Over time, this creates a feedback loop where attention, emotional response, and memory all become aligned around that individual. This is why love can feel all-encompassing. It's not that the world changes, but that your brain is selectively highlighting one part of it. Salience also shapes how both creativity and love evolve over time. In creativity, ideas that are repeatedly reinforced become more refined and developed, while others fade away. In love, repeated interactions and shared experiences strengthen the bond, making the connection more stable and deeply rooted. There is also a balancing aspect to this system. Too little salience can lead to indecision or lack of direction, where nothing feels particularly meaningful. Too much salience, on the other hand, can narrow focus excessively, limiting flexibility and perspective. The brain constantly adjusts this balance to maintain both focus and adaptability. This filtering process is what allows both creativity and love to move from a wide field of possibilities to something specific, meaningful, and worth investing attention and energy into. Machines can simulate choices and even produce outputs that resemble human decisions, but they do not possess subjective experience, and that distinction is central to understanding their limits. When a machine generates a response, it is operating based on patterns, probabilities, and optimization processes. It evaluates inputs and selects outputs that best match learned data or programmed objectives. From the outside, this can appear similar to human thinking, but the underlying process lacks any internal sense of meaning or awareness. Human decision-making, in contrast, is deeply tied to subjective experience. When you choose something, that choice is influenced not just by external information, but by how you feel, what you value, and how you interpret the situation. Emotions, past experiences, and internal states all shape your decisions in ways that are unique to you. This creates a layer of meaning that goes beyond the observable behavior. Desire is a key part of this difference. Humans experience motivation as something felt, a pull towards certain actions or outcomes. This pull is driven by neurochemical systems, particularly those involving dopamine, which signal what is rewarding or worth pursuing. Machines do not experience desire. They can prioritize certain outputs based on programmed criteria, but there is no internal sensation or motivation behind those priorities. Emotional attachment is another major distinction. In humans, attachment involves complex interactions between brain systems that regulate bonding, trust, and connection. These systems influence how you relate to others, how you invest your time and energy, and how you respond to social experiences. Machines can mimic language associated with attachment or simulate relational patterns, but they do not form bonds or experience connection in any real sense. Meaning is perhaps the most important difference. For humans, meaning emerges from the interaction between experience, memory, and emotion. It is what gives significance to actions, relationships, and ideas. Two people can encounter the same situation and derive completely different meanings from it based on their internal states and histories. Machines, however, do not generate meaning internally. They process symbols and patterns without attaching personal significance to them. This absence of subjective experience also affects creativity. While machines can generate novel combinations of existing information, they do not have an internal perspective that guides why something should be created or what it represents. Human creativity is often driven by a need to express, explore, or resolve something internally. That internal drive shapes not just what is created, but how and why it is created. The difference becomes especially clear in contexts involving love or deep connection. Humans experience love as a combination of biological processes and subjective meaning. It involves feeling, interpretation, and personal investment. Machines can simulate conversations about love or generate responses that appear empathetic, but they do not experience care, attachment, or emotional depth. This distinction highlights that while machines can replicate certain external aspects of human behavior, they do not share the internal experiences that give those behaviors their depth and significance. Technology can significantly enhance both creativity and human connection, but it does so as a tool rather than a replacement for the underlying processes that make those experiences meaningful. Machines can expand what is possible by increasing access to information, accelerating workflows, and generating new combinations of ideas. This can reduce friction in the creative process, allowing individuals to explore more options in less time and refine their work with greater precision. In creativity, technology acts as an amplifier. It can help you visualize ideas, generate drafts, or experiment with variations that might take much longer to produce manually. This can be especially useful in the early stages of creation, where exploring multiple directions quickly can lead to better outcomes. However, the direction, intention, and final meaning of the work still come from the human using the tool. The machine provides possibilities, but it does not decide which ones matter or why they should be pursued. There is also a collaborative aspect to this interaction. When you engage with technology, you are often responding to its outputs, selecting what resonates and discarding what does not. This back and forth can stimulate new ideas and push you to think in ways you might not have otherwise. In this sense, technology can act as a catalyst for creativity, introducing variation and prompting exploration. In terms of human connection, technology has made it easier to communicate across distances and maintain relationships in ways that were not previously possible. It allows for the rapid exchange of information, emotional expression through text, voice, or video, and the ability to stay connected with a wide network of people. This can strengthen relationships by increasing frequency of interaction and reducing barriers to communication. However, there is a difference between facilitating connection and creating it. Genuine connection involves shared experience, emotional presence, and mutual understanding, which are rooted in human biology. Elements like tone, body language, physical presence, and timing all contribute to how relationships are formed and maintained. While technology can transmit parts of this information, it cannot fully replicate the depth of in-person interaction. There is also a risk that over-reliance on technology can reduce the quality of both creativity and connection. Constant exposure to pre-generated content or rapid communication can limit the time spent in deep thinking or meaningful interaction. Creativity often requires periods of reflection and internal processing, while strong relationships depend on attention and presence. When these are replaced by continuous input and distraction, the depth of experience can decrease. At the same time, when used intentionally, technology can support these processes rather than interfere with them. It can create space for collaboration, provide tools for expression, and help maintain connections that would otherwise be difficult to sustain. The key factor is how it is integrated into behavior, whether it serves as a support for human processes or becomes a substitute for them. The balance between using technology and maintaining direct human experience determines whether it enhances or diminishes creativity and connection. As this balance is maintained, technology becomes a powerful extension of human capability rather than a replacement for it. Creativity remains driven by intention, emotion, and meaning, while connection continues to be rooted in genuine presence and shared experience. In that state, machines expand what you can do, but the depth and significance of what you create and how you relate to others remain fundamentally human.